result from that, mind on the importance of doing outreach, of having a way for us to communicate not only to the different urban centers, but also some of the smaller communities about this work that's happening. I hate for our region to miss out on this opportunity. So one of the solutions that the different regions have suggested and have implemented, which I find that I think that's something I feel we need to do here, is the different regions have started creating subcommittees. So obviously we have our main committee here that all of you have so graciously volunteered and been appointed to, but in addition to that, subcommittees have been created for various purposes. I know some of the regions have what I think we need to have in our region, which is a subcommittee focused specifically on doing outreach. And their focus happens to be making sure that the smaller communities know and understand what's happening with regard to this planning effort. And it dovetails with outreach, getting ideas of projects, getting ideas of drainage problems. I appreciated Ms. Mary Johnson, who spoke earlier about the nature-based interest in doing nature-based design, a subcommittee that would help us make sure that we have those different types of approaches, a technical subcommittee that is able to, once the consultant starts generating, developing their process, a subcommittee that is reviewing the technical piece of that and is then able to report back to this committee so that we have a better sense of it. So I want to make sure, and I want us to talk about it, have an opportunity to create these various subcommittees. The way I see it is some of you that sit on the overall committee would then sit also on the subcommittee, and then we would augment with some other folks, experts, that we can add to that. Is there any thought around that? I'm curious to hear from the Texas Water Development Board what your thoughts are on that, as well as some of the executive committees that we've had conversations on. Anita, any thought on that? I'll go to you first, and then open it up for any other comments.
Hey everyone. Yeah, I have witnessed and heard through my team of other regions using subcommittees. I would just make sure you pay attention to your bylaws that kind of focus on how they're defined. But I do think that they could be useful if you guys decide to use them for things such as outreach or working for a specific goal within the region.
Thank you. That's good advice. We'll certainly do that.
Nancy, I have a comment I'd like to make.
Yes, sir. Yes, John.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I think having a subcommittee would definitely give, us, as a whole, a lot more ability to really speak to a lot of the issues. And when we have a smaller setting, I guess people are encouraged to engage and contribute a lot more, maybe technical background and experience, which helps kind of really get into issues that we may not, be able to explore, investigate, or talk about and discuss in a larger forum like we have now. So I think that would be definitely a good avenue to pursue and try to look at,
Certainly. Thank you, John. Suzanne, Kara, David, any thoughts on the subcommittees?
Well, Neffy, this is Suzanne. I think it's a good idea. I think particularly as this is the first time, we've gone through this, regional flood planning process. I think we're all sort of learning and need to have some opportunity to spend some more time, potentially as we get more into the technical information. And, as Ms. Johnson said and other presentations were made, I mean, if we're trying to think about the criteria by which we are going to look at projects and determine our recommendations going forward, it would be helpful, I think, to have some of that work being done in a committee.
Nephi, this is Kara. I'd agree. You know, I'm served as the liaison to Region 10, which is the lower Colorado, Lavaca, you know, the Austin area, basically. They are also looking at committees. I think we need to be cautious. One, the volume to do would be difficult. We'd be meeting all the time to talk through every issue as a full committee. Just at the pace this has to move for the first, you know, round of this, the first ever. But we don't want to create too many committees. I would caution, you know, we can't walk away with 5 or 6 committees and be effective. We really need to look at, I think, in my mind, public outreach is one. Not that that committee has to tell the consultants what to do or to be at every public outreach opportunity, but it's to help facilitate interactions, ideas, communication may be one. You know, I'll say the Region 10 yesterday had some discussion. They've got a draft set of goals that have been working through. Now they're trying to narrow them and really wordsmith them, and they decided a committee to do that versus the entire group working on that volume of detail. And then really one that kind of is looking at, I don't know if I'd call it technical, but more the criteria for ranking and prioritizing projects from a technical basis as well, or some of the ones that I'm hearing from other planning groups. So I would think we'd want maybe no more than 3, 4 max, but trying to keep that number manageable.
Thank you, Kara. Just for clarification's sake, you said a communication subcommittee, a criteria for ranking technical committee, and what was the other one?
I don't know that we need it, but an example that Region 10 yesterday talked about having a small group working on their goals criteria, and they wouldn't be a long-term committee. It was hey, here was a presentation from the consultant based on the survey and data collection we've done to date. Here's our list of goals, and I don't remember, they had something like 20 of them, and everyone went, well, 20 is way too many. Let's come back and reevaluate this. Let's narrow this down. And so they're talking about a committee that would short-term focus on that and then be done with that task.
Got it. Got it. David, did you have any thoughts on it? David Wegman, did you guys have any?
I think he's muted.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Maybe same issue as Mary, speaker not working.
You have to go up to the speaker settings and you just toggle it to the other microphone and it should hopefully work. Go up to settings and then the speaker, and then you just hit the little arrow and switch the microphone and maybe it'll work.
Sorry, Dave, we're not hearing anything.
All right, what about now?
The best, most meaningful words Wegman's ever told us.
Debbie, do you have any thoughts on the subcommittees?
I really like the idea about having the subcommittees. I think that we could be instrumental in helping the consultant in gathering a little bit of information, focusing a little better, because I know that the group is really under the gun for the time limitations. So yes, I think it's a great idea. And for sure, a technical committee and a public outreach. And I think at our meeting, executive meeting, we talked about emergency response, and that's such a specific area. I almost feel like it's a standalone, but like Kara's talking about, maybe a short-term subcommittee.
Good point. Mr. Klaus, Stephen Klaus, any thoughts that you might have on any of these subcommittees? I know in your experience with Region L and water, any thoughts on that, sir?
Sure. First off, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Got over that technical challenge. I had a little challenge getting on, but Caitlin helped me. So thank you very much, Caitlin. So I really like the way that Kara laid it out. It seems to make sense to me. I don't know how we would manage the information and organize our thoughts without having a subcommittee structure like that. I think we'll debate a little bit more on exactly what those committees should be. But I agree with Kara that the number of committees needs to be managed, but I don't see us really advancing the ball without having a few subcommittees reporting back to the executive committee, sort of as Kara has laid it out. I like that.
Thank you, sir. Jeff Carroll?
No, I agree. I mean, we do similar things for our city, that we have subcommittees that kind of break out. We're in the process of doing some other stormwater stuff as well. So we have subcommittees that meet and talk over stuff and come back to the main. And I agree, that concept I think will be very helpful here.
Thank you, Jeff. Anybody else? Oh, I see Mr. Mock on the call and Stephen Gonzalez. Any other thoughts, you guys, on any particular subcommittee or?
I think it's a really good idea with the subcommittees, especially the one for outreach. A lot of communities don't realize, what we're doing out here. So I think that would be a really good idea to help, get the word out.
Mr. Weckman, I believe we can hear you now if you would like to try.
Okay, I thought I had all my audio fixed. Can you hear me?
You got it.
Great. No, I agree with the consensus of the groups. I just would like to, I guess, admonish not to have an overly abundant number of subcommittees. Things get a little bit cumbersome when we have too many things going on and too many meetings happening constantly. As long as we stay focused on the need for those subcommittees, I'm good.
That sounds good, Dave.
Neffy, it's Kara again. Can I ask the question of both, the River Authority, and then I know Ron's on here, from HDR as our consultant. Have they thought about this, of what they're hearing in other areas? Do they have a recommendation on what? And I don't think if we create committees today, I don't think that's the end of this conversation or the opportunity to add or even delete. But do we have a recommendation from our sponsor and consultant on what some of those should be? I see Ron chiming in.
Yes, Kara, this is Ron. I guess for my recommendation, I think support from the planning group working with us is always appreciated. We have, I think everybody is in agreement. We have a lot of tasks to complete, but I do agree that we probably can't have too many because just fitting it all in is going to be tough. I like the idea of the outreach. I know that's some of the other planning groups have an outreach committee, and kind of the two big things that we're working through right now. And maybe it's more, Neffy, it's more of a technical committee or something of that nature, because there are some decisions that are coming up, like Anita mentioned. Today we're going to talk about, a couple of the tasks that are ongoing. And for example, the task 2A and task 2B. 2B is a big one because we have to make some decisions on how we're going to define the future floodplain. And there are a couple of different avenues that we can go down. And then once we get into task 3, like Kara was talking about, you start getting into what your floodplain management practices are and setting goals. And what the goals that you're setting is a number of structures that you remove from the floodplain in a 30-year period or over a time period. So there are some decisions that have to be made. So, I definitely think a planning or public outreach is definitely a good one. And then maybe it's a technical committee that can go through each one of the tasks that when we have, we can meet periodically and run the questions that as we run through the task and get to junctions within the decision-making process, we can run it by the subcommittees. But because I think they're going to change, right? We're going to get into task 2 and we're going to have some questions in task 3, and they're going to be different in 4 and 5. So as we go through, so really and truly, my recommendation would be, something like a technical committee or something of that nature. But I'll leave it open to others as well.
Nephi,
No,
this is
certainly
Suzanne
appreciate
again.
that. Yes, ma'am.
I did send to the executive committee a couple of reports that were given by the Region 11. I'm the liaison to that group, and they had prepared a public outreach plan, I can't remember exactly what they called it, but I shared that with y'all, with the executive committee, and they've also gone through kind of a series of decisions. They haven't really created committees. They're kind of working as a committee of the whole, but they are having particular deliverables that they're sharing. But I do think that public information, the public outreach plan that they put together did have some good components in it that could at least, if there's a public outreach committee formed, it could be a good thing to review as one of the resources for that group. Because I imagine most of the public outreach would be done through the River Authority, but with guidance from the committee as to specifically how we can beef up the outreach and the involvement of as many of our communities as possible.
Yes, ma'am. Certainly appreciate that. I hear your I hear everybody's interest in creating a communications committee. We'll certainly do that in a technical committee. I do agree with keeping the subcommittee number relatively small, not too many of them, but certainly feel that that needs to get done. So for the next meeting, let's make sure and start creating those subcommittees. And Caitlin, if you can help me make sure that we coordinate with Texas Water Development Board, making sure that we follow all the guidelines for the creation of the subcommittees, and then we can have a further discussion on who will be a part of those subcommittees. So for now, the 2 that I have that are for sure would be a communications committee and then a technical committee, and then potentially maybe 1 more, and we can discuss on what that may be as we move forward. So, and that's all I have to report from the chair's report perspective. Let us move on to item number 6, discussion of appropriate action regarding our flood planning group membership. Some of you may be aware, some maybe not, but we do have a new general manager for the San Antonio River Authority. And Derek, I'm not sure if he's on the call, but
I'm on, Nephi.
Oh, Derek, all right. Welcome. Good to have you here.
Thank
sir.
you.
In discussion of this, we felt we had a pretty long discussion in a meeting at the executive to discuss the membership and the fact that and let me share this with you if you're not aware of this, but we have HDR and Half Associates as a team under contract through the San Antonio River Authority, as well from funding from the Water Board, but that contract is being administered through the San Antonio River Authority. And as such, we felt the need to have Derek as a part of this committee, because other than that, we don't have a member of the San Antonio River Authority to be a part of this. So in long discussions, we have come up with the following actions that I want to pose for consideration. And I have 3 actions that I'm going to propose, and then we'll have an item for discussion. The first action, after much discussion with the executive committee and its members, is the action to create a new position. We want to create a new position, a nonprofit representative, and this would be a voting position. So the action is to create a new nonprofit voting position would be the first action. The second action with that would be to assign or move Suzanne Scott from the representative of the River Authority to represent that new position, that new nonprofit voting position. We feel the need to make sure that Suzanne is a part of our team. Her experience and her work as a former general manager is valuable to us, valuable to our region, and we feel that we cannot lose her. We want to make sure that she continues in our committee as a voting member, and our recommendation would be an action to move Suzanne into that position. So that would be the second action. And then the third and final action, and we're going to take these individually. So the third and final action, I just want to make sure you understand where we're going with this. And the third action would be to move, and we would move to assign Derek Bowes into the Senate, into the River Authority representative position. So it would be those three actions. One, to create a new position, a nonprofit voting position. Second would be to move Suzanne Scott to that new position as a voting member in this committee. And then third would be to move Derek Bowes, into the current general manager, into the River Authority representative position. Any discussion about those three actions? We will vote on each one individually. So is there any comment or any discussion about the following actions that we will be taking?
You know, Neffy, this is Kara. I'll just kind of chime in. Or Anita from Water Development Board, do you want to comment, question first?
Yeah, I just had one question for clarification. Is the third option still a voting position, or would that be a non-voting position?
Voting
Still
position.
voting. Good question, Anita. Yeah, this is Kara. I'll just kind of add to what Neffy's saying, since I was part of the executive committee discussion. You know, Suzanne has been with the River Authority a long time, has, tremendous knowledge of the basin and downstream issues and we felt there was great value she still brings to the process, but that it really was important to us that we had someone on the committee in the River Authority position that was working for and leading the River Authority. And so this was really a way that we found. I think I've been vocal from the beginning, concern of expanding the committee, but this was a unique situation we found ourselves in with the transition of leadership at the River Authority. Both bring distinct skill sets and values to this, first ever flood plan for our region. And so this was our way to include and bring the benefit and strengths of both of those members and both of the perspective of river authorities that they represent.
Thank you, Kara.
So Neffy, this is Steve Klaus, and I'll just ask. Certainly we want to find a way to get Derek into the process. Are there other alternatives that were considered and before you laid out these three, or is that the only way that we can see to really get him involved?
Steve, that's a very good question. We did discuss several different options. We were cognizant of, we were very reluctant to add additional voting positions. We talked about different options, and one of them was maybe a backup to Suzanne, but I just didn't feel that having a backup would really do our basin justice, because really both of them bring such value to our region, and I didn't want that position to be shared, if you will. We looked at different other scenarios, but at the end of the day, we just realized we needed both of them, and as voting members. And I think the executive committee felt this was the best solution in creating a second position, a voting position as for to represent nonprofit. And then Derek, which by the way, his last name I believe is pronounced Bays. I think I said it incorrectly first time, but we did consider other options. Yes, sir. Any other comments from the executive committee or from the overall committee? Any other questions about the actions we're about to take?
But I think, Steve, if there are other ideas, I mean, we're not hard set, but we struggled with, you go to the extreme of Suzanne steps down, but then we don't have her historical perspective. We kind of went all over with this, but are open to other discussion ideas from the group.
I think it makes a lot of sense for this particular case, but I do have a lot of concern about just keep adding people to the voting members. So I want to voice my opinion that I don't think we need any more. But that does make sense in this particular case.
I will say, Jeff, I was, outspoken on that same issue and a little concerned. We even batted around, is this I won't call it temporary, but an interim additional voting member that served through this initial planning cycle and flood plan and then be reevaluated following that. We didn't really want to put that kind of restriction, but that was something we talked about. Steve, it looks like your ideas.
No, I was just going to offer that I would agree. All things being equal, the representation of the River Authority and their influence in the process is a little more equal than the rest of us. I think we need to have a larger voice from the River Authority, past and present. So Suzanne stepping down, in my mind, that's a non-starter. Derek acting as a backup to Suzanne doesn't accomplish what I think we need to do here. So I'm comfortable with the approaches laid out.
Right. Debbie?
I think you're muted, Debbie.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I agree with the executive committee's decision. I think it's a very good solution, at least for this first go around.
Thank you, Debbie.
And Neffy, this is Suzanne. I'll just make a comment. I appreciate the consideration. Obviously, I understand the complexity that this adds to the group, but I do appreciate the consideration to allow for me to continue to serve on this committee. As y'all know, I was at the River Authority for 20 years and was very involved in the creation of the Bear Regional Watershed Management Program, which ultimately became the model for even creating the flood planning process for the state of Texas. So I really do believe I have a lot to offer to this group, not only from my past, but also my current position, looking at nature-based solutions as well as the basin knowledge that I do have. So I do appreciate the consideration, and I understand completely the desire of Derek to be on this group as the general manager of the River Authority. I understand that completely as well. So I do appreciate the executive committee and this committee's consideration for these actions to allow for both of us to continue to serve and bring our expertise to this process. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Suzanne, and I really appreciate your dedication and work in this and the knowledge and experience you bring to our team. If there isn't any other comment, then we will move with the first action, which is the action to create the creation of a new nonprofit voting group.
I'll make a motion.
And I'll second.
Any discussions, comments? If not, let's take a vote. All in favor of the creation of a new nonprofit voting position, please indicate by, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Also say, please make it known. Okay, action passes. The next action is to move Suzanne Scott into the new position, the new nonprofit voting position.
So moved.
I'll second that.
I'm sorry that who did second? Who seconded that motion?
John, go ahead.
I think we talked over that. Yeah, I seconded.
Okay, John Beasley seconds in. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Before I take the next action, which is to Derek Bays into the position of the River Authority, I'd like to ask if Derek, if he could say a few words. If the group has not had an opportunity to meet Derek, Derek, would you take a minute to just kind of introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your background and your experience?
Neffy, sure. Thank you. And thank you to the group for the consideration today. I've been the general manager of the River Authority now for about the last 3.5 months. I'm coming from New Orleans. For the last 4 years, I was running the levee and the flood wall system that protects New Orleans for hurricanes and from Mississippi River flooding. Lived in New Orleans since 2006, with the majority of my work being focused on flood protection and some ecosystem restoration as well. Prior to that, I was an active duty Corps of Engineer military officer for 11 plus years, multiple tours in different places. And degree-wise, civil engineer from Rice, engineering management from Missouri Rolla, and licensed attorney in the state of Louisiana from Loyola in New Orleans. A lot of emergency management experience, as you can imagine, in New Orleans. And, you know, a pretty broad variety. I've been in the private sector as an executive for some national engineering firms, and then also in the public sector, both with the federal government, and then my last agency, which was very similar to the River Authority, being a political subdivision of the state.
Thank you, Derek. Any questions for Derek from the committee?
Mr. Chair, this is Morgan White with the Texas Water Development Board. I'm here supporting Anita, and I just wondered if I could have a chance to bring up some bylaws concerns.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I haven't had a chance to pull up your specific bylaws yet, but as I'm listening to the conversation, I think most groups have bylaws where if you create a new position, you have to open up that position. You have to solicit for that position. You have to open it up for 30 to 45 days. You have to accept applications, and only after you go through that process can you choose someone to fill the seat at the table. So I was concerned with the creation of the new voting position for the nonprofit category, and then immediately filling it. I'm not sure if that is in line with the process in your bylaws. So I encourage you, and then also the sponsor, to kind of look up that on your own to make sure.
I think we checked that.
Yes, I think we checked it, and I did not think that was a part of our bylaws.
It is not a part of our bylaws.
Thank you.
Caitlin, can you clarify that, please?
Yes, our bylaws don't indicate that we have to go out for that solicitation process, that the committee members can just take action to create a new position and move someone immediately into that position, as long as action is taken.
Okay, well, I'll get with Anita. It's possible we have an outdated version of y'all's bylaws, so let me get with her and take a look at that.
Okay, because we had one more action to take. If it's okay, Morgan, we will continue with our agenda, and if for whatever reason things need to change, then we can take that up further. But I do believe we had checked prior to making these motions.
Okay, thank you. Yes, and I hopefully started with that caveat that this is what most bylaws say, so we just wanted to jump in and just make sure that you guys had checked and thought that through with your bylaws. So
Okay.
Thank you,
Okay.
and we'll let you know if
Thank you, Morgan, for that. And then as far as for Caitlin and Brian, if you guys could please help me double check that. I know we talked about that, so let's just once more check. But we will move forward with the next action as stated. Is there any other comments or questions for either Derek or myself on the next action? Hearing none, then the action that I propose on the floor is action on moving Derek Bays into the River Authority position. Can I have a motion?
This is Kara. I move that we appoint Derek to the River Authority position, a voting position.
This is Debbie Reed, and I second.
Thank you, Debbie. Let's take a vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay. Hearing none, no opposition, the action moves forward. Thank you all for taking up these actions and items. The next and final item of discussion and potential action is going to be with regard to the membership in the executive committee. Suzanne Scott will now be a part of the nonprofit voting position, and Derek Bays will be the River Authority representative. That leaves a question within the executive committee. Suzanne Scott previously filled the role as vice chair, a position that this committee voted. With these changes, I want to present to you a challenge that I see and I have, in that within our executive committee, we don't have a representative of the San Antonio River Authority. And the reason why that's an issue is because the contractor, our consultant, the consultant that we work with, HGR and HAF, we don't have somebody that controls or manages their contract within the executive committee. And for that reason, I want to propose that we discuss the position of the vice chair position for consideration. I am not interested in increasing the number of the executive committee, because then if we did, that would be half of our committee would be in the executive committee. Plus, we'd have to figure out what role that position would take. Want to have a discussion about that executive committee. We did meet during the executive. We did meet and discuss that, and felt that the vice chair position should be brought for discussion in this group. Is there any thoughts on this? David, Kara, Debbie, you all were in the executive committee this last time. Any thoughts from you guys with regard to our discussion?
One thing I would add to that, Neffy, is that we did discuss expanding the executive committee, and I'm still pretty strongly we're at 5 people. Getting larger than that is, one, disproportionate to the overall group, and just not bringing too many people into that role, and didn't want to expand that. I agree of the benefit and the need for a river authority representative to be in that, serving in that role and on that executive committee. But, you know, expanding it was an option. You know, Steve's thing, did we vet options? And this one is one. I think I feel very strongly of not expanding that group.
And I guess I had the opposite opinion, is that with the wealth of knowledge that Suzanne brings to the table and her experience, that the executive committee could really benefit from that position, an additional position.
I think I would side with Kara more on this one. I think you can get disproportionately large on the executive committee side. I think if Suzanne were just to be continue to be a voting member, but not on the executive team, I do not think that the overall flood planning committee loses any of Suzanne's knowledge. And then it would seem the reasonable thing if Derek would even be amenable to it, to then assume that vice chair position. But that's just my opinion for discussion.
Any further discussion before we discuss any action?
I'll just state that I'm willing to do whatever the committee feels is best in this regard. You know, I understand completely Neffy's desire to have someone from the River Authority on the executive committee, and I understand that completely. So don't feel as though if this action is taken that I'm going to take it personally or be offended in any way if y'all ask me to step down from the vice chair and then nominate someone else to serve in that role. Neffy needs to have a executive committee that he feels represents the interests that are important to him as the leader of this group. And I'm not going to stand in his way at all as regards to the leadership he feels is necessary in the management of the flood planning group. So I'm willing to take whatever necessary step for the benefit of the group. Thank you.
Suzanne, I certainly appreciate your comments. And keep in mind for the group, the decision making and the decision on projects and the direction of it lies within this committee. The executive committee meets in order to help with the direction and so forth, but ultimately the final decision is taken by this committee. So we're not losing that in any kind of action that we do that. And that's what's important to me, that the balance within the group is important to me. But at the same time, I see the value of making sure that somebody who has the direct responsibility of the contract with our consultant is represented in the executive committee as we need this consultant to perform actions and move and hold them accountable. And that's where my desire is that Derek Bays be a part of the executive committee.
And Neffy is maybe an appropriate way to go about this is just to kind of reopen the nominations for the vice chair position and, you know, come about it that way.
Probably I probably need to resign from that position first, officially, so that it's open. So if that's the will of the group, I will submit my resignation from the vice chair role on the executive committee to allow for that to be an open position, and then nominations can be accepted.
I think that would be appropriate. Thank you, Suzanne, for voluntarily stepping down from that role. I will open the nomination for the vice chair position within the executive committee. Any nominations?
This is Dave. As I mentioned earlier, I think it might be appropriate if if Derek was amenable to doing so, to nominate Derek with the River Authority as the vice chair.
Can I get
And
a
I'll second that. This is Suzanne.
a second by Suzanne? Any discussion?
Nephi, I guess I should say I am amenable and appreciate the consideration.
Thank you, Derek. Quite the commitment there.
Didn't know how to phrase it.
Hearing a nomination and a second, let's vote. All in favor of nominating or appointing Derek Bays as a vice chair within the executive committee, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Nay. Hearing none, motion passes. Thank you. Congratulations, Derek, and thank you, Suzanne. Let's go on to agenda item 7, discussion and appropriate action regarding the consultant's work and schedule. I think that's going to be by Ron. Is that correct, Ron?
Yes, I think I'll give you all a quick update on where we're at right now.
Thank you, sir. Time is yours.
All right. Well, thanks for having me today, and I'll go through this pretty quick. And kind of what we want to talk through today is give you an update on the schedule and where we are, kind of like on a status update, kind of how we've been rolling through it. And then I want to talk about a few tasks. Task 10, the stakeholder outreach that we've all been talking about. And then task 1, 2A, and 2B. And if you go to the next schedule, Caitlin, kind of where the schedule is. And so kind of my thoughts and my plan is today we talk about task 10, which is a public outreach, which kind of goes the entirety of the contract. And then task 1 and 2A and 2B, which we're currently working on the hardest right now and blowing it going. And then hopefully in the next in meetings to come, we'll go over the task 3A and B and 4A and B in more detail. And so that's kind of where my plan is to go through, so you know how we're going to set that up. A little more about the schedule. We got underway, got under contract, got moving in July, and it's been a feverish pitch to start collecting the data. It is a large GIS effort, and we're coordinating this with our sub-consultants and with other planning regions that we're doing, because a lot of it is overlap. So we're trying to collect as much data as possible from across the state, focusing on, of course, Region 12. But there is a ton of data required, and we'll talk a little bit about it. We're going to, we're in the middle of processing that. And so I guess as part of this is I'm kind of going to talk through task 1A or 1 and 2A and 2B, and hopefully next time should be able to show you a little bit more results. And kind of as we step through this, we'll talk about it, and then I'll be able to show you some results. Get into a little bit more detail. Task 1 is a little hard to show in a lot of detail because it's a lot of data. I can show you databases upon databases and all the data that has to be collected and populated the correct way and clipped. And so, but we will bring some of that to you. But that's one of our main focuses right now is 1A, and then 2A and 2B gets into how we're identifying the existing floodplain and how we're going to identify the future floodplain, and we'll talk through that a little bit. But this is kind of our overall schedule. I plan to update you at each meeting. We are progressing. It is a tight schedule. We are very aware of that. We from where the other basins are, we're probably maybe a little behind to some basins, and I think we're right on par with others. We're moving as fast as we can to catch everything up and give you a better update next month, hopefully, as we start to catch up. Again, we have a lot of this data, and we're able to use some of the things that we're doing in other regions. So it's given us the ability, as we're working through these, the processes are the same for every region. So we're gaining valuable knowledge, having that insight. And so I'm working with my counterparts at HDR and HAF as they go through their other regions to look at these things. So I'm going to jump right into the stakeholder outreach.
Ron, real quick, before you move forward, if I can make a comment.
Yes.
And I know we have a real tight schedule here, and you're presenting some good information, but I want you to keep in mind that within our river basin, we have done significant amount of work in developing a lot of these things. So please take advantage of some of the work that the Bear Regional Watershed Management has done and the River Authority have done in the subsequent basins. Please keep that in mind as you're moving forward.
Oh, Neffy, don't worry. We're going to be leaning on our partners heavily as we run through this. So we're aware of a lot of the data, and I'll talk a little bit about how we're going to reach out and get some of that. So as we go through a little bit about the stakeholder outreach, we have a long basin from top to bottom, and different geography, different aspects. And so over the next coming weeks, we needed to get some of the data pulled together. That way we knew what our data gaps were. You don't want to, we wanted to know just as much what we have as what we don't have. And so now we're getting a better feel of the things we're going to need and the things we're going to be asking for as we go down through the basin. I think this was a slide I've kind of shared with you before. These are kind of areas that we're targeting to have meetings throughout the basin. I'll be working with Caitlin and Brian to set up these meetings, and if we want to have other members from the committee join us, we will be sharing those. But the idea is to meet with the stakeholders and then have a public outreach to those that would like to join and learn a little bit more about the process and how that's going to work. So over the next few weeks, you're probably going to start seeing some emails and some invitations to go out, and many of you will be a part of them as a stakeholder. So I expect to see all of y'all there participating and helping us out as we go through this. You'll be representing your different entities. So more to come on that, but that process is starting, and we'll have HAF and our other sub Jimenez helping us out with that as we go down through the basin, and we'll be cognizant of what we need to provide at each one of these meetings, and we will be leaning on the River Authority and their knowledge as they've done a lot of outreach in the lower basin. So next slide. Some of the tools that we're planning to implement that we've implemented in other basins, and I'll show you an example and give you the opportunity to go check it out. So we're going to have an interactive mapping tool and surveys. We've deployed this in Region 13 in the Nueces Basin, and Caitlin and Brian approached and liked the format and liked what we had done, and so made sure that we were going to do something similar for the basin and for Region 12. And I'll kind of show you an example and walk you through that and mention the website here in a minute. We're also planning to, on the Region 12 website, that's kind of where we host it all at, and we'll be able to provide more information there, take that over, work with the River Authority and the Water Development Board to add some of those things, add links as we needed. We're also probably, I know we will put it on the SARA website and their information. We can also work with other counties, Bexar County, other municipalities, Bernie, City of San Antonio, all the way down Goliad, whoever we can work with as we're going through these stakeholder meetings to get more information and links put up as we go through there. And we'd be remiss if we did not mention social media as part of this outreach. It is a huge component to this. So we will work with the River Authority to put that message out, work with the City of San Antonio, again, other communities, how they would like to put that message out, but we will provide that with our outreach team. And of course, as I mentioned, stakeholder meetings and public meetings. Those stakeholder meetings will be important, and it's not, you know, we need a lot of the upfront GIS data, but then we will be talking as we go through. So looking ahead, right? I'll foreshadow a little bit about what in region in task 3A and 3B we talk about. The goals, as I mentioned before, and we also talk about floodplain management practices. So we'll want to get a survey from all the stakeholders on what their floodplain management practices are, and along with future, you know, projects, future projects that they will have that'll come up in task 4 and existing projects. So there's a lot from the stakeholders that we'll have to reach out from. And again, we know that a lot of that is pulled together, Nephi, in the Upper Basin. We know a lot of that outreach is going to take place in our rural areas of the basin and lower basin. So we'll be focusing on that. And just from the outreach that we've been a part of, and being a part of the meetings that I've heard from other basins, nothing has, we have, the way you get the most information is just flat out email and contacting one-on-one. When you send out flyers and when you send out surveys, a lot of times you don't force people to give you that answer. And so I think we've had the most luck across the region, and from what I've heard from other consultants, is reaching out one-on-one to each individual stakeholders and asking for specifically what we need. So that's going to be a part of it too, is reaching out to each one of these individual stakeholders and following up from the public meetings and getting the information that people provide. Also, we'll develop an ArcGIS story map. This will give as for right now, we're planning only to have it inward facing. So the executive committee, the planning group committee, Sarah, and anybody we deem we want, will have this GIS online system that can track the comments. You can see the comments that'll be coming in. You can see the data that will be collected, and kind of give. It's a way to. We have the data collected anyway, so it's a kind of a way to people to follow and see what's coming in. And so in a way, everybody can kind of be on the outreach committee. You can add in your areas of interest to the surveys as above. And then in the areas that you see that we're lacking, maybe even if you're not on the communications committee, you can reach out to me or Caitlin and say, hey, I have a contact in this city or this county, and I think we can help. So, you know, I think we can all take it on as a group, and the more data that we get, the stronger our plan is. You know, this is the region's plan. And the data that we get is the best available data, and so we'll be working hard to grab that. Next slide, Caitlin. This is just a quick snapshot, and if you go to the Region 13 flood planning website, this is on there. They have some videos on how to use this. There's YouTube videos on how to use this, and here's just I took a quick snippet of this. This shows the basin. This actually shows that there's some comments that have been made already, and then you can see the survey on the right side asking for the location, the time frame, and when the flooding event occurred. And then it also has the ability to upload images and videos. So those are always great to have, a great tool to be able to upload those images, because that really helps defend the issues when we say we have them. So this is a tool we can use. I urge you to check out what we have, and we'll be hopefully deploying this before the next for Region 12. But by the next meeting, you will see we'll have our own, and we can start getting the comments. And Caitlin, I'm sure, will send out the link to everyone. But if anyone would like to look at this a little bit more, if you can't find it, please reach out to myself or Caitlin, and we can send you a link to the Region 13 website that we have up and going. And ours will be very similar. And again, if once we get on there, if we need to update anything or add additional questions, we can do that to the survey. So
Ron, I saw that website, and as well as I've seen some of the other websites throughout the state, but this was a really good one. please share that link with Caitlin. And Caitlin, if you could please send it to the committee members, I really would like for everybody to take a look at it. There's some pretty good information on there.
Awesome. Thanks, Neffy, for that. And so that was kind of where we're at on and the plan going forward with the outreach. Is there any questions before I move on to task 1 and some of the things that we're doing there on the outreach, or are there any comments or ideas or things that anybody on the planning group would like us to focus on as we work through this process? Awesome. Well, hearing none, I look forward to getting that outreach committee developed and put together. That way we can work through this and start gathering data. Again, this is task 10 is the process that goes from start to finish. And we know this one task isn't as much of a sprint as it is a marathon. And we know that we'll be collecting data from start to finish. And so we will approach it as such, but really and truly, most of you will probably see us in these stakeholder meetings, and we will be approaching many of you for some information. And so look forward to seeing you there, and look forward to helping everyone, encourage others to attend. So task 1, planning area descriptions. This chapter is a pretty general chapter. It's similar to what's in the water plan. If you're familiar with the Region L, it's an overall description of kind of what we're dealing with in our Region 12 basin. And so the biggest thing is it looks like it looks pretty basic. The crazy thing is a lot of the data collection is involved in this first planning area. But to go through a little bit about what's expected in this first part, it's the social and economic character. The way the board defines that is looking at through the different parts of the basin and where we have flooding issues. What are the social aspects that we need to consider, and what are the economic characteristics of the flood prone areas? And so defining that. So the first thing you have to do is obviously develop the flood prone areas and types of flood risk. Is it coastal flooding? Is it riverine flooding? Is it flash flooding? Is it just sheer volume of flow downstream? So defining all of that for the different parts of the basin is important. Key historical events, right? I mean, we'll be working with our meteorologists to grab that, but as we get through those, I don't think anybody knows the historical events any better than those who have been impacted the most. So and many of you were in positions where you were impacted, and so gathering that information from this group will be important as well. Political subdivisions, making sure we capture all the cities and counties and government entities correctly. Development codes, right? Getting with all of the cities, all of the counties, and making sure we have what type of development code they're requiring and how they're doing things. A big part of this task 1 is, defining, and then this is where you get into having an agricultural representative is important, is agriculture and natural resources flood impact. And this is done more by area, right? So it's looking at how many acres of cropland are affected and how many acres of farmland are affected, because, just because it's there's not economic damages to a structure doesn't mean there's not economic damages to the farmers and ranchers in the lower counties. So being cognizant of that is going to be important. And so identifying that with as much agricultural land that is in South Texas, to identify that is a large task. So also current flood protection measures and infrastructure, identifying, the River Authority has several dams, NRCS type dams that they are responsible for, and identifying those and some of the major waterways that are in place. So having all of the infrastructure and all of the streams and it may not go down to every, we're probably not going to identify every detention basin that's in an apartment complex, but the regional infrastructure that protects our communities and our people is important. And so the deliverable for this is so each one of these tasks has its own chapter. And so task 1 will be the first chapter, and it'll have a lot of the data, a lot of the characteristics, a lot of the images and of the information that's available, and where things are, how the overall basin protects itself. And then the deliverable is defining that existing natural flood infrastructure, also the construction, the natural infrastructure, the dams, or the lakes maybe, and the waterways, and then the constructed infrastructure like some of the dams and storm drain and other things like that. And then the big thing is the tabulated list of existing GIS data. And I have some information here in a minute in one of the slides, and you can see you can say, oh, you have to collect the floodplains, and it's what you have to fill out in the database is very extensive, and so there's a lot that goes into each one of these different pieces of information to be compliant with the regional plan. And so here's an example. So the data collection process is kind of what we're starting, and here's kind of task 1, and they overlap a little bit, right? As we're collecting data for task 1, we're not neglecting 2A and 2B, and there's also 3A and 3B, but I removed those from this list, but wanted to kind of show. So task 1 is, these are the things that are required by the Water Development Board to have, and there's several of these, and these are the ones that are, these are the data sets that are required for task 1, 2A, and 2B. The entities, the watersheds, the existing infrastructure. And so here was just one. So the proposed ongoing flood mitigation projects. This isn't even all of the information that you have to collect from there. And I know it's hard to see, and I don't expect everybody to be able to read this, but I just wanted everyone to know that there's a lot of information that goes into here, and some examples is into this layer, right? And there's a geodatabase, and into this layer, this existing, the existing infrastructure layer is, there's the HUC 8s, the HUC 12s, the HUC 10s, the stream center lines, and so it's a massive database that we're putting together for each one of these layers, and so this is a big GIS effort, and so data collection is part of it. And so the Water Development Board provided a lot of this data, as we'll see here in a minute, and we know where a lot of the data is for some of the cities and some of the counties, but we do have some more data to collect, and we've supplemented these data sets with the National Bridge Inventory, critical infrastructure for military facilities, critical infrastructure for schools and cemeteries, and so there's different things that we've supplemented into this data collection. The dam in the National Dam Inventory as well, and which even rates their bridges or rates their dams and classification. So the data sets that we're going to have coming out of this are going to be incredible, and all the data will be in one place, so it'll be really nice once we go through this. Caitlin, next one. So and the Water Development Board provides templates. So they have a template of 25 layers that we have to populate, and each one of those has data that we need for each one in the data dictionary. And so as part of this process, that's what we're going through right now in task 1, and starting into task 2A and 2B is just gathering that data and getting all of that data dump into there and starting to look for the things that we don't have. So all of that feeds into task 2, the next slide, the existing conditions flood risk analysis. And so the main objectives of this are to identify the existing conditions flood hazard analysis using the best available data, whether that's FEMA or some of the other tools that we'll have that I'll talk about on the next slide. But so that's the existing conditions flood hazard. And the second thing is high-level GIS-based existing condition flood exposure, and to identify how residential properties, public infrastructure, roadway crossing, and agricultural areas, how that's impacted by the data set that we develop. Because it's not just the FEMA layer that we're the FEMA floodplain that we're going to be looking at. It's going to be much broader than that. And then there's a little bit of analysis required in this task for existing condition vulnerability analysis, and it's the vulnerability, looking at the vulnerability of critical infrastructure in the region, the resiliency plans that are in place by the different communities, and the emergency management plans that are in place. And so I think Debbie mentioned that earlier, is looking at that emergency management. So part of that will be getting in there and looking at what we can, collecting all the data from. So those are the other things that we have to collect as we're talking to stakeholders. Is there resiliency plans, emergency management plans, and those things. And so next slide, please, Caitlin. We received the Texas Water Development Floodplain Quilt in May that they published that, and it has the national flood hazard layer, the effective data, and then there's other data that is available and is becoming more available as we go through the process. Is this base level engineering? Base level engineering is a process that the Water Development Board is going through to update unmapped areas of the state, where they're looking at a 2D modeling process that takes out some of the bridges, and it's a quicker way to get some data, and it processes it in larger quantities, so they're getting large amounts of data quickly. So that we have some that is available for Region 12. The River Authority has seen some of that data. Half Associates is one of the firms that's working on that, and so been working with Troy to collect some of the data that they have, and I know they're still underway in other portions of the basin, so we're ready to get that. And then one of the things is we've heard a lot about and is the Fathom data. The Fathom data is another data set that the Water Development Board is going to be part of their quilt. It provides flood inundation for areas as well that we don't have the BLE data, and this Fathom data. I think there's been some delay in that, and so we're the last that I had heard, and maybe Anita can update us on that, but the last that I had heard is that Fathom data would become available in October. And so that does put a little bit of a cramp on some of the things that we're to use it for. But we've been working with the Water Development Board, and all the consultants and all the regions are in the same boat with that. So we're in communication with the Water Development Board and all of the basins, and how that's going to affect the plan moving forward. But as of right now, we're going, as long as we receive it in October, we're going to use it to the best of our abilities and update the plan. But I will keep everyone abreast on if that date changes, or if anything it changes because of that deliverable to the planning groups.
Ron, this is Suzanne. I just have a quick question I wanted to ask you. With all the data that you're getting from the state, from the Water Development Board, and of course all the information that the San Antonio River Authority has gathered with a lot of the work that they've been doing over the last few years, I guess my question is, if the data conflicts in some way between what you get from the Water Development Board and what has been developed through the San Antonio River Authority, what do you use? Or is that a question that we're going to ask the technical committee to look at if it doesn't align? You know, oftentimes this data doesn't completely line up in all cases, and just wanting to know what you're considering as best available data. Is that the local data that has been done, or Water Development Board, or some combination of both in some areas? I mean, obviously I know that the River Authority has not been able to map all tributaries, and they're working through that process, but just curious how those conflicts will be resolved in this data layer.
That's a great question, Suzanne, and we're working through that process. But for the most part, I'll try to generalize it. So as long as there is, we'll use the most detailed data. So where the River Authority has models and mapping that have been developed and gone through the rigors of intense science, we will use those, and then we will use it as the data as it goes down in sophistication, I guess you would say. And so a great example is the River Authority has mapped Zone A floodplains, and the intention is for the BLE data to take over those Zone A floodplains. So where we have the BLE data, that would replace the Zone A floodplains. And so that's how the FEMA and the Water Development Board are going to update their maps in the future and going forward. And so that's how we would use some of that data. But I guess if there was, if we did get into a situation where we had, I think most of it is pretty straightforward. But if we did get into a situation where we had to use one or the other, we would bring that back to the planning group to make that decision, Suzanne.
And then one more question. As you're looking at all this, obviously, and we learned this with the Bear Regional Watershed Management Program, but I'm just trying to get a sense of it from this flood planning group perspective, that you're looking at certain areas. I mean, we determined in the Bear Regional Watershed Management Program that we were looking at projects at 1.5 that serve 1.5 square miles or more from a drainage area perspective, when we defined projects and programs, so that the local projects, the local drainage projects, were more looked at by the city and the county individually, and then the larger scale projects were looked at holistically by the more regional approach, I guess is what I'd say. As we're thinking about the planning here, how small is the drainage area that you are asked to map to?
When you get into some of the, we're going to be using the data that's already mapped. And so I think some of the BLE data, the way that that's created is it's on the HUC level, Suzanne. And it's the process right now is they're going to drape rainfall, which is they kind of just put the water on the surface and let it go where it may. And then I would have to look and see at what point that they're cutting that off. I think it's 1 square mile, and I think it's but I think it's up to the limit of their center lines and waterways. So I think it's 1 square mile. I'd have to check on that, but yes, they are. They're kind of letting the model run itself and define itself on some of where the floodplains are. But yes, there would be a cutoff, and it is, it would be similar to what we're using here locally in that 1 to 1.5 square mile, I think.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So, and a little bit of how we use that, how we'll use that floodplain. It's so we get this existing floodplain that we talked about, whether it's FEMA, BLE, Fathom data, however we get it, and we overlay that floodplain quilt on aerial imagery and verify structures and identify new structures and get a count. And one of the things that I know that the River Authority has been working on is updating their planimetrics of some of their buildings and identifying the number of residents in some of these buildings. And so we'll be working with the River Authority to get that data as we overlay this to get a count. And so that's, you know, and this was one exposure. You know, there's also low water crossing exposure. There's also commercial exposure. There's also industrial exposure, agricultural exposure, and you do it in the same way, right? And it's a desktop process where we have different, you know, whether it's, you know, most of it's based on land use. So the collecting all of the land uses from the watershed and the building footprints is a big part of getting all of that data together. So again, working with the River Authority, I know they have the majority of that, and then maybe some of the lower counties have things that of the other nature. But the existing conditions is fairly straightforward, other than, you know, defining which flood exposure hazard layer that you're going to use. But then the next slide, we kind of get into future conditions. So it's this one gets to be a little bit more where there's more questions in it. So the future conditions flood hazard analysis, the way it's defined by the Water Development Board is a no action scenario for approximately 30 years. That's assuming that there's current population growth, continued development increase, current floodplain management policies and anticipated climate change. So basically, we keep doing exactly what we're doing, status quo, for the next 30 years and what would happen. And some of the things that we do have, right? Some of the things that we say, oh, okay, well, great. I know in Bexar County and City of San Antonio and some of our other rural communities during DFIRM, we developed the future condition flows. So that future condition is, you know, we have that in some parts of the basin, but in others we don't. But the one thing that we don't have that is required by the Water Development Board is a mapped 500-year floodplain in all areas of the county. And so that'll be a challenge on how we define that, because we have the models, we have the means and methods, but the sheer volume of what it would take to map an entire county with a 500-year floodplain is going to be difficult. So coming through a process on how we're going to define that 500-year will be important. And as we're working through it, you know, this is definitely one right now. We're talking through this 2B is one of the main things that we're working through. It's 2B is what's keeping me up at night right now. So it's the questions that I'm going through and living through right now. So we're looking forward to getting that technical committee on board, Neffy, so we can get some weigh in on some of this as we develop a process. But right now, as we're vetting a lot of these processes, we're coming up with ideas and we're looking at ways to do it. And I thought I had 5 good ideas last week and they all got shot down because, you know, once you start looking at, you know, hey, we can get the existing floodplain and subtract from the surface and get a depth, and we can do different things. And then you realize how many panels you would put together to have a surface for the entire basin, and you know, it's the amount of data that it. You know, that's the one good thing we have. We have a lot of data, but the bad thing is we have a lot of data because you have to be able to process it. And so, looking through this scenario, this future conditions is going to be is going to be a challenge, and it's going to be different, right? The 500-year in Bexar County is going to be different than looking at the future conditions in the lower counties and how we're going to define that future conditions. And I'll keep plugging along and kind of show you some of the things that we can talk about. And I know there are going to be questions, so I'll leave some time for that. Then the second task there, or the second objective there go back one. The second objective there is the high level GIS-based conditions flood exposure. So again, that's taking this future conditions, and just like we talked about in the existing condition, is overlaying that onto the areas to find out residential properties, public infrastructure, roadway crossing, and agricultural areas that are not that are outside of the existing, but inside the future conditions, right? Identifying that. What are the future, what's the future flooding conditions, and being able to identify that. And also doing the same thing for the vulnerability analysis. What critical infrastructure is now in the floodplain, and how are we handling resiliency for climate change, for sea level rise? What are the things that we're doing in that aspect? And then emergency management plans. Our emergency management plan in 2020 is going to look a lot different than emergency management plan in 2050. And so we need to have that, at least have people start talking about that and how we're going to update those plans. Step forward one, Caleb. So the estimated, so the Water Development Board gave some guidance to estimate the future condition flood hazard layer. So the first way that they proposed to do this was an increase on population development and growth. And again, this, for Bexar County, we have the future conditions floodplains that the River Authority has mapped, and we did during DFIRM. And so we have that data. But for the lower counties, again, 500 years, the question in Bexar County and in the city of San Antonio and the DFIRM counties, and then in the lower counties, looking at that future, looking at these options on being able to determine future conditions. And it's one of the ways is an increase based on population growth. And Suzanne and Steve, y'all might remember that the Water Development Board, this is the way the Water Development Board approached their water plans. It's based on population growth. And so the method would be here is, do we have a future conditions floodplain? We do in Bexar County and the lower counties, no. So we go into this flow chart. We have method one. Well, we can do that based on population growth, and then you correlate that to water surface elevation increase and floodplain width. This there's a lot of different ideas on how to do this right now, and we're working through those. With the water surface, there's been studies in other regions that the Water Development Board has referenced that document water surface elevation increase based on population. There's nothing that says, hey, if you increase the population by 10% in Bexar County or Goliad County or Wilson County, that the water surface rise is going to be X. So it would be the responsibility of the planning group to set that if this is the method that we're going to go with. And then, and I'll show you a little bit more about that here in just a second. And then, or you have the ability to utilize the existing conditions 500-year chance event as the future conditions. But, and so we have that in some areas. So we could use that in the lower counties. We could utilize the existing conditions, the 500-year, if those are available. Some of the data will have it, right? Some of the Fathom data will have it. Some of the BLE data will have it. But so it's going to be determining. So now it's not just what information, what floodplains do you have? It's what the different flood exposure layers have. Again, the Fathom data, the BLE data, and the FEMA data, they all provide different things. And so getting the best fit is what, and then what's important. But then a combination of all of these assumptions is probably what we're gonna have to come up with some combination of that. So of these three things, the increase in population, the 500-year, and a combination of the assumption is kind of the methods that we're looking at right now. And we will bring these in more detail to the planning group committee as we work through these. But this is definitely the challenge that it's not just Region 12. I promise you, every region is going through this right now. All the consultants and the Water Development Board is aware that we're working through this, and we're working with them on further guidance and what they expect. So we're we're working hard on this, and we will keep everyone up to speed on which way we go. And again, it's going to be different in different parts of the basin, and it's going to be based on best available data and a combination of what is available. So next slide. And so a little bit is, and here's an example, right? So here's the future. So the Water Development Board provides future conditions, future condition population growth, and they provide a percentage for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. And so that data is readily available. And here's an example that's in the guidance documents that Anita was talking about, the technical guidance that is an example. So for an area, if you have a 1% increase in population, you would have a 1/10 increase in water surface elevation, or however it corresponds to one another. And that's a difficult process to and what that's going to require is getting into some of the models and looking at the difference between existing conditions and the future conditions that we have in Bexar County, and maybe we can make some assumptions. So we're going through all of those procedures right now, seeing to what correlations we can kind of put based on the models and based on the data that we have, looking at the 100-year and 500-year and saying, hey, the average floodplain width increase between the 100-year and 500 years X, and maybe that using that as a buffer. So everything's on the table right now. We're looking at all the different ways that we can correlate something. I mean, at the end of the day, what we want to be conservative, and we want to say, in 50 years or in approximately 30 years, if we don't do anything, this is what our floodplain would look like. And so that's our challenge right now, is being able to identify what that is. The existing is fairly straightforward. It's that future that we're going to be working through over the next several weeks as we keep building this plan. Next slide, Ken. So I just walked you through task 1, 2A, 2B, and then we're definitely going to get into and my box shifted a little bit here. I wanted to show that we were going to be looking at 3A and 3B and 4A and 4C, those coming up in the next meetings. And so we are heavily focused again on task 1 and 2. We're starting to, as we get into public outreach, it will force us into 3A and 3B as we're getting more information, because we're going to have to be reaching out to the stakeholders for floodplain management practices. What practices or what codes are in place, and then what are our goals, and defining those goals. And that's part of one where I think it's important. Once we get into 3 is with that technical committee. Once we get into 3 and 4, I think that technical committee will become even more important, because when we set the goals for the group, that doesn't need to just be your consultant team or your sponsor. That's part of the planning group. And so getting that input before we bring it to the board, to the committee, is important. So that's kind of where we're at. It's kind of a quick snapshot, a lot of information. I know there's a lot of data. I probably made more questions than I did answers on some of this, but that's the way I feel most days after we get into some of these. But this is the first ever of its kind, and so there's not a lot of data, or not a lot of how to do this out there. So we're working through it with our sub-consultants. We're working through it with the sponsors, and partnering with the Water Development Board, and they've been very helpful. So we are moving and we are going forward. At this time, I guess I'll open it up if there's any additional questions for me on what you have seen, or if there's any information on what you want to see at the next meeting.
Ron, this is great information. Thank you for that thorough presentation. I am interested in maybe in further discussions talking about any kind of database of any nature-based projects or work that has been being done within the basin. I think it would also be beneficial for our team to know of projects that are going on But so far, so good. This is some good information. Any other comments from the committee?
I had a question. This is Debbie Reed.
Yes, ma'am.
Ron, when you talk about doing nothing for the next 30 years, does that include where the current development codes are with the municipalities, or are the development codes that are in place today
I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. They just fucked me so bad.
Yeah,
I mean,
the idea on that, Debbie, is looking at the development code that is today, not making any improvements to those. So yes, it's not abandoning development code. It's looking at, hey, what does Bernie, what does Bear County, what does the city of Goliad, what do all these communities have in place right now that would limit, and because the other thing is it's going to be looking at as we go through this, what are some of the higher standards? What are some of the goals moving forward? Is some of the goals improving those development standards? So yes, the idea is leaving what's in place right now for the next 30 years. No improvements.
So those anticipated increases in water elevation is with what is in place now.
Yes, that's kind of looking at what we think the future conditions would be, So again, and it's kind of how some of the cities do it now. You have to assume that if there's detention requirements in place or no impacts in place, so the future condition is the 100-year condition. So if you can have a zero rise community would be the same thing. So
okay. Okay, great. And one more question. In your inventory, I noticed that you did have natural flood infrastructure included. Will you be looking at inventorying and being able to include in your modeling things like separated wetlands? That means wetlands that are separated from floodplain areas, and also some of the headwaters, especially on the primary tributaries.
Yes, ma'am. Where that data is available and being able, and we have that, and so that'll be part of what we reach out to, because I know that's not something that's just readily available for most people. But especially as we get down into the coastal communities, looking at what's been done down there with the marshes, the wetlands, and all of that definitely has been identified. So we'll be able to do that. I think it'll be a bigger challenge, in the headwaters and in Bear County, and throughout. And so that's where I'd look for maybe you and Suzanne to kind of help direct us into being able to identify those natural the natural areas that are already available, and being able to identify those as part of the plan.
Excellent. We'll try to do that.
And Ron, I guess, just to sort of kind of think about this from a simple perspective, I have to kind of think down, with all the technical information. Some of the information you're doing right now and is sort of existing conditions, if everything continues as it is right now, and then adding some of these future conditions in it. So you're going to kind of get a gap, right? You're going to find out sort of what needs to be mitigated between where we are, where the future conditions are, and then, those guidelines that we have to come up with as to what are we trying to mitigate to, as far as taking how many homes out of the floodplain, how many protecting of critical infrastructure, whatever. There's going to be a gap that we're going to get to at some point in this analysis. And then what are we going to do? What are the projects that we want to put in the plan to mitigate that gap? And I guess the question, I know we talked about this at the executive committee, but I just want to kind of have this conversation here. This process that we're in, because it's in such a fast time frame, the ability to do scenario analyses, i.e., let's look at more nature-based versus gray infrastructure, those kinds of things. That is going to be kind of limited in this process, but that does not mean that we can't say we want more analysis to be done on this, or we want to make sure that projects are looked at. If nature-based options can be incorporated, then what is the criteria by which we would like to have those nature-based solutions be assessed by. So I just want to make sure that we understand, and you had said that there's not a lot of opportunity to do the what if scenarios with various strategies, but we can still build it into our recommendations for the plan. Is that what I understood you to tell me?
Yes, ma'am. That's exactly. I guess the best way I guess I can explain it is let's assume this is the PER phase, and we're looking at something very high level, and that's how we're trying to get our plan developed. That way, we can have a mechanism to allocate your funding, and once we have a project identified and we have a project to move, down the road, there's a project to move forward with. I think those things can be vetted then, and right, that information could be put in. But we do want to consider, like you said, find some of these projects and so that they can be implemented into the plan, and especially highlight some of those that already have those, right, that Neffy's talking about. I know there's projects identified out there that include nature-based solutions, that include these different strategies, and so definitely highlighting those, and I think that that'll help the scoring process and ranking process as we move forward through this. But yes, the adding a whole bunch of new solutions or new projects is going to be tough. And we talked about Anita mentions the money that was coming down, and I think a lot of the regions are recommending that that money be applied to future projects and identification of future projects, so that more can be done on the development of these projects. But as of right now, it's kind of, we're going along fast as we can, and it's identifying projects, and it's kind of like the water plan, right? If you think it's an option and you want to have it in your plan, and you think that's what you might want funding for, we need to get it in there and make it as strong a case for it as we can. And if it is nature-based solutions, that's part of that, that's great. But as far as looking at how one project impacts the other, I know we had that conversation, Suzanne. That's I think that at this high level, we're kind of looking at it like this is a high level analysis, and we're putting this in the plan, and that's something that'll be vetted out in future phases or in the design as things get closer on. So I hope that answers your question.
John, I think you had a question for.
Yes, sir. I was just buying my time and letting everybody else answer. Ron, this is John Beasley. I just wanted to commend you. It was a very informative and really well presented presentation. I wanted to find out HDR. Do they have any short or long-term plans of analyzing climatology data models, or for existing forecasts, especially the impacts of maybe El Nino, La Nina, specifically on transportation and residential and commercial planning? And are they looking maybe to analyze that utilizing current or present geospatial data?
Well, as far as what HDR is going to do, and that's a very broad, that's a big topic, right? That's that's probably not a river-based analysis that you're talking about, a Texas-based. And so I don't think it's I guess what I should speak on is maybe Suzanne or Neffy or Caitlin or Brian may be the one to talk on it. The River Authority has gone through a study, I think in conjunction, right? Wasn't it with SAWS was a part of that, I think, and the city might have even been part of that. And there was an analysis, a climate change study that was done for the region. And so we will be utilizing that study. So I know there's a climate change study that's been done in the area, and others can chime in on how that was developed. The other thing is there is a climate change and that the Texas A&M did part of their extension for the coastal communities to talk about sea level rise. So yes, we're aware of the studies. As part of this study, we're not going to do a climatology or study, but we will be trying to the best of our ability, we will incorporate the data that is available by A&M, by the National Weather Service, and that was done by the River Authority and for the local area.
Okay. Thank you.
Any
Hey,
other questions for Ron? And if I can also add that this, a lot of the criteria that will be set forward really addresses meeting our deliverable. But as we continue, we can certainly look at other possibilities and incorporating other techniques. But thank you, Ron. Is there any other questions? I think there's a question on the chat if this presentation will be made available to the committee.
Absolutely. Caitlin has it and she can send it out. And I think this is all being recorded, so you can watch it either way.
Great. Any other questions from the committee? If not, we will move on to the next item. Thank you, Ron. Agenda item number 8 is a presentation by the USGS on ongoing projects within the region. Is it Doug who is presenting?
Actually, Doug is doing a detail in Utah this month, so he asked me to do it instead. So
okay.
If you don't mind, I will share my screen with y'all real fast.
Thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. So can y'all see my screen? Hold on. Can y'all see that okay?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So my name is Mike Nyman, and I am the data chief here in San Antonio.
Oh, it just disappeared.
Oh, if this doesn't work, then Caitlin has a copy of this also. Okay, how's that working?
Looks great.
Okay, let's see if this is going to. Okay, so let's start this over again real quick. So I'm with USGS. I'm with the Oklahoma Texas Water Science Center, and I'm the data chief here in San Antonio. I've been with the survey since 1997. I started in November 97. We recently merged with Oklahoma, so I don't have that graphic on here, but we do have 3 more offices there in Oklahoma. Locally, we're here in San Antonio, and we cover about 50,000 square miles, a little over, and we work with local and regional and local governments and all that. So San Antonio River Authority, Texas Water Development Board, Lavaca Nabridad River Authority, GBRA. Those are the folks that we really work with the most. And you can see here on this graphic that we pretty much go all the way from about 100 miles west of Houston, all the way over to about Del Rio. So, and then all the way to the border also. So I kind of wanted to give you guys an overview because I know some of you know who we are, but I think some of you probably don't. What we do nationally is we have more than 8,000 stream gauges across the country, and these collect information for active river, like what the rivers are doing. The way they work is that on the stream there'll be a gauge house like this, and we're basically just measuring pressure. So we measure how much water is in the stream. We'll go out every 6 to 8 weeks and make an actual discharge measurement. And then with those 2 pieces of information, we can calculate how much water goes through the river at any point in time. That information is all transmitted via GO satellite, and then the output comes up here on the web for stage and discharge. So our busiest periods are always during drought and during floods. So during flood events, we're actively going out there, working with the emergency managers, and verifying these ratings. So on this slide right here, I don't know if y'all can see this. Once we get stage and measure discharge, then we can put together a theoretical rating and come up with discharge values up at higher ratings. So when we're flooding, we're trying to go out there and get these things done. In the event that we can't get out to a site, we'll flag the high water marks and then go back in and run what's called indirect measurement and give you a theoretical value for the upper end of that. In the San Antonio River Basin itself, we have 53 gauges that begin up in the upper Medina River Basin, and then they end down just outside of Tivoli. So, so we've learned a lot in the last couple of years. So I mentioned I started in November of '97. In October of '98, we had a massive flood here in San Antonio, and so I kind of cut my teeth on that one. In 15, we had another big event, and I don't know if you all remember this, but in May of 15, we started flooding in the western basins on May 3rd, and this event continued until May 31. Huge amounts of rain dropped in the basins, and in particular was the one that's closest to us is Wimberley. And at the time, we only had 3 gauges there, and the first one was in Wimberley itself. So we've been working with Texas Water Development Board and with the National Weather Service to identify areas like this and like what is it that we can do to increase our response and increase getting that information and that knowledge out to our customers, our stakeholders, and the general population at large. This is the event that happened there. So we had a major event happen. It started at 10:30 at night. We had 31 feet of water show up at Wimberley in less than 3 hours, and I found it, not amusing, but I found it very interesting that you guys were talking about outreach earlier. And this is a big thing for us, is because we had folks die in this event, and we don't want to ever see loss of life. This information has been available for a long time, but now we're trying to get it out to the public and get it to them in real time. So what we're doing now with all of our cooperators is we're trying to get more gauges like this put out there. We identified big gaps in our precip network. We identified smaller gaps in our gauging network. San Antonio River Authority has been amazing at this, and they have, so what you're seeing in this picture is what we like to call them super gauges, because these gauges measure stage. We've got discharge. We're measuring precip. Now this looks like a big trash can hanging out here. This is it's a weight-based precip gauge, which does intensity as well as total volume. So we can see how much rain we get in an event in 1 minute increments if we need to. This site also has soil moisture probes, because the idea behind this is to monitor the antecedent soil conditions and try to determine when we're going to start seeing runoff and what that's going to look like. So on this particular site, it's very flashy. It's very far from us. It's in Laredo. And so we've also installed cameras on this. And so the cameras operate, they give us independent stage verification, and we can also look at that imagery and calculate the surface velocity of that. And on an engineered channel, we can, since we have the velocity and the area, now we can back into a theoretical discharge. So we can see how much water is moving through that system at any point in time. So during the Wimberley event, this is what came out of the Wimberley event, is because one of my coworkers lives in Martindale, and he's watching the event coming from Wimberley and wondering if he's going to have to evacuate his family. And while he's doing this, of course, he's got the National Weather Service feed up. He's got the USGS feed up. He's got all these different tools that he's trying to look at, listening to the Weather Service, and his power goes out. And so he moved from his computer to his phone and trying to look at all the things on his phone and surfing through all those web pages. Well, he thought, why don't we just combine this and make this into one product? And it's available on your phone. It's available through your desktop. And this is the part that we're trying to get everybody on board with, is if you go to the Texas Water Dashboard, it shows, and now it's Oklahoma's included in this too, and there's actually a national product now that is for the whole country. But you can select any one of those gauges, and once you click it, it'll open up this second window right here, and it'll tell you, and here's Medina River at Patterson Road. It tells you what the real-time stream flow value is. It tells you what the stream is doing. It's remaining steady, but it also gives you this option to subscribe. So if you live next to one of these rivers or creeks that we're monitoring, you can get an auto-generated text message that will tell you, hey, stage is coming up. You guys need to be aware. You may need to take action. So there's another one that does this, and this one I love. I use this all the time because this is, we call it Water on the Go, and this geo-references your location. So if you've got a phone, you can plug this in, and when you tell it, go find me, so you just click that little button right there, it'll pull the 5 closest gauges to you and tell you what the stage is doing and what's going on with them, if the water's coming up or if it's going down. And because it's got your location on it, you can either, like for us, we're going to these sites because we want to make measurements. But for the general public, if they want to avoid those areas, then they can easily see this and avoid those areas. So again, gives you the option to subscribe right here. So for us, we've got about 200 gauges that we monitor and maintain here in our area. What do we do with all that information? Because there's a lot, right? So the cool thing that we're doing now, and we've done this we're doing it in the Savinaw Basin, and the Medina Basin has been completed. But with the gauge data, we also have LiDAR data and cross-section surveys that we run. So once you start putting all these things together and we come up with a HEC-RAS model, then we can tie that all together and come up with a flood and inundation map. And this is the one for Bandera. And it's, these products are getting cooler all the time, because it used to be you just plugged all this stuff into it and you got what was like a bathtub model where you could see where water was coming up and fills up and where it was going. Well, now we've tied all these in with National Weather Service flood categories. And the really cool part is that once we're done with them, we're loading them into this flood inundation mapping program. Okay, so this program is managed by the Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana Water Science Center, and they're compiling all of these things and putting them into one place where you can find all of them. So the cool thing about this is, once you've got, say you select Bandera and you pick it up, you can go over and actually drag this bar up and start seeing what the inundation level will be in, based on the current gauge height or the predicted gauge heights. So that's, what I'm going to do. Let's do this. So once we get those, so now we got this flood decision support toolbox that we're working on with FEMA, National Weather Service, and the Corps of Engineers. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to try to go live with this one. So here are the two links if you guys want to copy them, or can share these out with you later. But I want to show you how this works because it's way cooler. All right. Can you guys see this web page? Yes. Okay. So once you click on that link, this opens up and allows you to choose either Region 6, FEMA Region 6, or Texas. And we'll just pull in Texas real fast. So these are the models the flood inundation models that have already been implemented and put in place and are available for you guys to view. At a glance, you can see the little up arrow or the down arrow on those. That tells you what the active stage value is doing, whether it's climbing up or it's going down. And we'll choose Bandera because it's a nice, easy one, and it's in our basin. Okay, so when I clicked on that, I'm just waiting for it to load. Let's do, I'm just going to change this base map so that it's not Google Earth and taking forever to load. All right, here's Bandera. Okay, so in real time, and the great thing about this, for a first responder, you can also have this on your phone and open it up, and it shows you where you are in town. So we can turn on our gauges, which there's Bandera's right in the middle right there. If we zoom out a little bit, we'll see Patterson Road and the surrounding gauges. We can turn on precip if we want to. We can turn on the active weather. And I don't know if we've got any weather up there right now. If it's going to turn on. That's okay, earlier we're going to gamble. Going live like this, you never know what you're going to get. The nice thing is you can also turn on the rivers, and for us, when we're responding to an event, I turn them on by watersheds, because then I know which watersheds we need to focus on and how we can work our way from the headwaters down to the Gulf. I didn't mention earlier, like San Antonio is kind of unique in that we operate in the entire basin. A lot of the other offices share basins, but we are working from one, basically from spring flow all the way down to the coastal inundation and coastal flooding. All right, let's turn on the flood map. And so, like we were saying earlier, you can you can start putting this into where you want your, like what your flood value is going to be. And from a first responder standpoint, you know, if you're going out into Medina or into Bandera and you need to get somebody out of a house or get somebody out of a neighborhood, you can, with this tool, see where the inundation is going to be. You can actually see at what level it's going to be. So how much water do I expect to find at 20 feet? Or let's just crank this up. Let's go all the way to 35 feet. So you can buildings here. When you do that, it'll give you a little notice saying that there is some you have to verify these things. I apologize for this going so slow.
Mike, are we still waiting?
Neffy, I think we've lost audio.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like it. Mike with the USGS, you still there? Or?
He's not even, Neffy, it's Kara. He's not even showing as a participant. I think he lost signal.
Oh, well, this was certainly a good presentation. I was really looking forward to seeing this. There's some really good things now. The USGS has done some of this work, I know, in the lower basins with these pre-delineated floodplains and actions. I certainly appreciate Mike presenting this, but just like anything, the feedback provided to the USGS on after action, you know, we had a situation in San Antonio where the USGS gauge was saying that at this particular stage, this action needed to take place. Well, that information was outdated. And we did have members of the media contacting us, asking us if we were doing this, but because it was outdated, we needed to make sure to do that update. So I envision that's probably what Mike is needing, and the USGS is making sure that we keep after action reports or actions relevant and up to date. I'm just seeing that Mike has left. So Caitlin, I don't know if you can take control back again of the screen.
There we go.
Okay, thank you, Caitlin. Let's. I know we're starting to have several members that are having to leave. I'm getting a couple of texts of folks that had to step out. Let me turn the time over to the regional liaison for updates. Beginning with let's start with Suzanne. If you could provide an update.
Sure, I will do this super quick. The Region 11 flood planning group met on August the 4th. They had it at the Wimberley Community Center. So they combined this as one of their public meetings. They had a very good turnout from residents of the area, and they provided a lot of good feedback to the group. I think that the interesting thing that they did is they kind of went through some of the same kind of information, although presented differently from what Ron presented, kind of going through some of these tasks. But they did kind of a interactive way of working with the committee as well as the attendees at the meeting to kind of give real-time feedback. So we did kind of a thing on our phone that they were asking certain questions about priorities and goals, and we were all trying to give our input so they could kind of get a gauge of what was important to both the committee and to the attendees at the meeting. So I think the interactive part of that was very interesting. But generally they're where we are, they're working on public input, and they're moving through some of these tasks that, same as Ron has presented. So they have another meeting coming up next month, and I will be attending that. For time's sake, I'll just stop it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Suzanne, for your update. Kara, Region 10. Sorry.
Region 10, yes, thanks, Neffy. Region 10 has been meeting virtually and had a meeting yesterday. You know, as Ron said, some regions are a little ahead of us, some are about the same. Region 10 is actually ahead of us. So they've already done some of that survey. I found some of the interesting, you know, survey closed for them on August 6th. They had 328 users identified. 87 basically started and participated in the survey on that outreach. You know, it covered 19 counties, 16 communities, 2 river authorities, 1 MUD, 1 COG. About 24 participants identified as rural and 15 as urban. So they are getting some good diversity in that online survey and outreach. They, you know, went through many of the same technical items. They're a little bit ahead. Like I said, they've got some draft goal statements, a preliminary chapter 1 on the planning area description, and then just kind of, they had materials in both English and Spanish available for the group to review. One item, I'm sure we're going to talk about it on item 10 on our agenda the next meeting. That group has been meeting monthly. They are going to skip September and give the consultant a little bit more working time and then come back in October. We did have a discussion that because the governor's emergency order waiving some of the requirements of the Open Meetings Act will expire in September, that they're going to go to a hybrid meeting format in October. But one of the things that was discussed is that in order to meet a quorum, if you're virtual, you have to have a camera on, and for any time that you turn your camera off, you are not counted towards a quorum. So I'm hoping that's part of our discussion and our when we meet and how we do it going forward. But that was something that was, you know, a little bit of, had a fair amount of discussion to clarify. And that's about it.
Thank you, Kara. Let's turn the time over to Region 13, Mr. Mock.
Yes, basically they started to stand up subcommittees. One they got going on now is for Technical Advisory Committee for Flood Mitigation. And it's just basically going to look at some of the proposals and give like a technical overview of it. Now that committee is going to have a conference call August 25th, and HDR is going to give a full, I guess, accountability and plan to the full committee on August the 30th. And that's all I got.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for representing our region, and please keep some good notes and keep bringing the ideas. Let's move on to item number 10. Discussion and appropriate action regarding our meeting schedule. We have been meeting every other month, but recognizing the amount of work that needs to move forward, I wanted to propose for the team monthly meetings. As you can see on the screen here. If you would please, I would suggest, I want to propose that we change our meeting to add those meetings shown there in red to continue our meeting. So our next meeting would be in August, and September, October, November, December, as stated. Is there any concerns with?
No, I think it's right now, there's so much activity, and you know, the consultant needs interaction and feedback from this group that it's important that we really right now be meeting on a monthly basis. And that doesn't mean we can't evaluate that month by month, but I feel like you know, only going 60 days without any interaction with them right now is detrimental to their progress, honestly.
Neffy, this is John Beasley. I have one. I just got one thing I'd like to say. Is there any way we could get some of these mornings pushed to the afternoon? 2 p.m. because the federal government, especially the U.S. Army Environmental Command, they tend to like to just cram everything in the morning, and it's hard for me to be on, 2 meetings I can juggle, but 3 to 4 just a little bit is much, and then I can only move so much. But I mean, not everything. Just I noticed the 21st September is 2 o'clock. Didn't know if we could maybe push another one to the afternoon. I appreciate it.
So I was just about to comment that I will not be able to attend the 2 o'clock because I have a previously scheduled meeting every Tuesday or every other Tuesday that conflicts with all these. So.
Well, let's take that into consideration.
Jeff, can you do mornings but not afternoons?
Correct.
Neffy, I'd like to make a comment about if we're going to want more public input, that maybe we need to have a couple of these meetings, or at least one in the evening or late afternoon.
I certainly agree with you, Debbie. In a certain way, I
agree with Debbie.
Subcommittee, in a way, I would. Participation from the public. Any other concerns or thoughts?
No, but are these going to be, virtual meetings? And Caitlin, had y'all had any feedback from Water Development Board on how that needs to be conducted? Or are these in person or hybrid?
Hey, Kara, this is Brian jumping in
Brian.
for Caitlin. We've been having discussions not only for the regional flood planning group, but also Region L. And so both of these processes need to, and we've also gotten internal legal feedback on how we can move forward with partial in-person, partial virtual. And it was just as you stated earlier in your on update was, where people that are participating online, if they're a voting member, they need to have their cameras on to be counted present that entire time. And, the prognosis moving forward with the way the Delta variant is spreading through the community and the state, we're keeping an eye on both sides of all of this. And so we're going to follow the guidance that the governor has put out, what our internal legal team has provided, where we can do virtual, but the presiding officer would need to be present at a meeting location, which would allow us to do some in person and some virtual, depending on the group's comfort and ability to be in person.
And Brian, that would begin as of October, is that correct? Because the current order goes through September, or in September 1st?
It's my understanding that it ends September 1st. And so the September 21st meeting would have to be a hybrid at this stage if we were to have a virtual option.
The Texas Water Development Board has arranged for a call with Flood Planning Group sponsors this Wednesday to discuss this. So once we get more guidance from them, I can bring that back to y'all.
Okay, we appreciate it, Caitlin. And I guess really the question that I asked the group is then, does everyone, if hybrid is an option and, we stay under the current conditions, is that the preference, or do people prefer going to in-person meetings?
I prefer hybrid, especially for our lower basin folks.
I do like the idea of having the committee in person, and then others, such as the Water Board, who are mainly in Austin, and some of the others to be able to dial in. So I like the concept of a hybrid with the idea of those that can be in person. We do.
So I'll comment from the city perspective. We've really seen our participation increase quite a bit at city council meetings with the hybrid format that's allowing people to come if they wish or to watch it online if they wish. We've noticed quite a bit more participation. So I would comment I would like the hybrid.
This is Doris at CPS Energy. It's the same hybrid. You get a lot more participation, flexibility, and with the COVID virus, that's the Delta virus, I think it's important to keep health and safety front of mind. Health and safety is a very high metric for our company, so I would personally prefer to continue to participate virtually.
Okay, well, I mean, my only thoughts is just Caitlin, Brian, Derek, y'all keep us posted on what we need, but for now, I think we'll all just kind of assume that it's hybrid unless we hear otherwise, and you'll be giving us guidance as we get closer to the meeting. I know it's going to be evolving if the governor issues a new order or not, but just keep us posted.
Will do. I will say that if we are planning on having that extra meeting in September, then we need to take action on that. For the others, if there's going to be date or time changes, we'll need to take action on that as well.
So let's go ahead and take action on that extra September meeting now so that we can get it on the books. But I think there are some concerns about the time. Is there a possibility of having that meeting in the morning, or does that not work for people?
I thought that was a conflict. There was some other standing morning conflict.
John had asked for afternoon meetings, right?
Yeah, I'm fine with September 21st at 2 p.m. Yes.
Does anybody have concerns about moving the September 21st to a 9 o'clock meeting? Could you please check your calendars?
I'll be late, but I can participate for part of it.
I'm good.
Derek, you're good. Kara, you're good, but you may be a little late to that meeting. Suzanne, it sounds like
I'll be late.
you're good. Debbie, are you good for September 21st at 9?
Yes, I can do that.
Okay. Jeff, I assume that works for you, Jeff Carroll. Steve Gonzalez, give him a thumbs up. Okay, that sounds good. John Beasley.
Yeah, I have a confliction at 10:30, but the meeting only lasts maybe 30 minutes. So if we go to, I'd bow out for 30 minutes, be back on at 11.
Okay.
So
is there any other voting member that I failed to recognize or ask?
Wegman, is that a commissioner?
Wegman dropped off. He had to leave. Steve Klaus had to leave.
This is Doris. 9 o'clock works for me.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Mr. Mock, I think you're still, David Mock, I think you're still on the call. Okay, he works for him. So I want to take action to add the September 21st, 2021 meeting for 9 a.m. and as well as November 16th, 2021 at 9 a.m., taking our meeting schedule to meet monthly.
Neffy, did we want to wait on that meeting until we get a recommendation if we want to push one of these meetings out to be later, as Debbie had suggested? Or do we?
Yeah, I feel, yeah, let's do that. Let's do that, because I do think an evening meeting may serve us well to move one meeting just to give the public an opportunity to join in and provide comments. I'm going to hold off, Caitlin, on the November meeting. Take appropriate action, then we'll allow the subcommittee to provide us recommendations on when that would work. So the only action on the floor is to add September 21st, and to a correction, a 9 a.m. meeting on that day. Do I have a motion?
This is Debbie Reed, and I make a motion.
Doris, I second it.
Okay, Doris.
Doris got a seconded. Thank you, Doris. Hearing any discussions, can I get a vote? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? A nay? Hearing none.
Now,
motion
I'm
passes.
just going to chime in that I think it's better to get meetings on the calendars and add additional stakeholder meetings and things. You know, it doesn't mean we have to do it now, but we can't each month just be booking the next month's meeting. Most of us don't have calendars that allow that flexibility. The consultant needs some certainty. You know, I think the more we get things set, we can add ones at alternate times and things, but I think we're going to need to start locking dates in.
Understood. We
I
should.
wasn't opposed to the 16th. It was just the time of the day, whether we were going to push it out or not. So, I mean, if we want to, we could say 9 o'clock on the 16th and then it changes to the evening, or people hold the whole day. That was the only thing, because from an action perspective, they needed to know the time. I'm not opposed to the date. It was just the time, I think, is what Debbie was suggesting that we consider. That was my only comment here.
That's my comment also.
We'll take the needed action in August, and it'll be just one meeting.
I mean,
I
September.
I understand what you're saying there. Let's move on to the next item. Caitlin, we're running short on time here. Let's open it up for public comment. Again, 3 minutes per person. Do we have anybody that signed up?
I believe that Mary Johnson would like to make another comment.
Okay.
Yes, this has been absolutely engrossing, and y'all are all so awesome. I mean, this is just more information than I could take in, but it makes me, looking at the broader picture of this, we definitely need funding for more nature-based solutions. And the public outreach, you have to have, the public need to know about this. Education is so important. And I can see that there is a huge disconnect between like development codes and what needs to be implemented. This is so important, our water conservation and our water quality. And I really appreciate the work y'all are doing here. And I think that the only way you're going to get code changes, developmental changes, is through public pressure on their representatives, you know, at a city level and a state level, because I can tell you that most of the developments, I mean, I know about the best management practices and the low impact developments. And as a neighborhood leader, we have to fight tooth and nail to get them to implement those practices, because there's no teeth behind them. So I can see how frustrated y'all must be, but there has to be a way that we can get more teeth behind those. And when I talk to the developers and they say, we can't afford to do that, it costs us much more money to do that. And I'm like, well, we can't afford to let you build in our city then. And I know that this is not just a San Antonio thing. This is like a Texas thing. And so the public outreach, I think, is so important. And if I can help in any way, you know, I'm here. And just thank y'all so much for all the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson, for those good comments. Certainly appreciate your attendance and your comments. Caitlin, any other person signed up to speak?
No other comments.
Okay, having completed that, next item on the agenda, item 12, the date and next meeting, or potential agenda for next meeting, which is September 21st.
Items that I have for the next agenda would be the creation of these subcommittees. And then we will discuss stakeholder meetings as well.
And the correction on the screen is September 21st at 9 a.m.
Correct.
Any other agenda item that you feel we need to cover?
I guess a consultant update is almost a given every single month, isn't it?
Yes, that's a standing item.
Neffy, just one comment for the consultant. Will we be able to review the survey that will be sent out to stakeholders between now and September so that we can make comments intelligibly?
Ron said that they would be able to do that.
Excellent. Thank you.
What's this intelligent part, Debbie? Can't we just comment anyway?
Okay, I don't know about intelligence. You're right. Thank you.
Anita, anything else that we need to include in our next agenda that you can think of after hearing today's discussions?
Not right now, but thank you all for all of the information y'all shared today, especially the presentation by USGS. I really appreciate that.
That was excellent. Yes, thank you. All right. Well, not hearing any other, I think we have our marching orders. We have a few items of discussion, and we will proceed with that. The next item on the agenda is to adjourn. I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second. Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Second.
All right, we got a second. Having concluded that, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for your participation, and it's good to see you all, even if it's on a little screen. Please be safe, and we'll talk to you guys soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, everyone.
Sounds good.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you, Matthew. Thank you, everybody.